Stories from Foster Care is brought to you by the Irish Foster Care Association in association with the Department of Children, Disability and Equality.
I'm Niamh Barrett and this is Stories from Foster Care. Today I'm sitting down in the studio with Clodagh Downes. Clodagh is a care-experienced woman from Limerick who has studied social care and adult education and who now has a role at Tusla in the area of quality and regulation.
I was a very quiet child. As a result of my experiences, I very quickly figured out, or I thought, quiet children get left at home, because anybody who's been in the care system will tell you quite quickly, it does not matter what's going on at home, you want to be there. It doesn't matter what trauma is going on there, it doesn't matter what upset. Every single child you will speak to within the care system, I would imagine, or most of, will say they want to be at home.
We talked about Clodagh's early care experiences, her time spent in relative care, and her journey towards becoming a person who could support other people in care. So thanks, Clodagh, for coming in and coming up all the way from Limerick to talk to us on the podcast. Really appreciate it. And you're generously speaking to us as somebody with lived experience of care and also someone who's been in the social care system yourself. And both of these perspectives are really interesting and valuable. And I'm just wondering where you would like to start in telling your story.
I'll start at the beginning, as most good stories start really, and my journey began as a young child in the foster care system. I had a couple of placements, so the background at the moment is a little bit sketchy in that, as anybody will know who's looked for their files, they're not always what we might expect to receive. So information can be, I won't say that it's not accurate, it is absolutely accurate, but not everything is there. So we're only piecing together what we have from memory and what the documents tell us. So a couple of placements, as far as I'm aware, and then some time with relatives and stuff, but lots of moving.
Yeah,
I would say, yeah, very young with lots of moving, which brings its own, I suppose, tales with it of that can be very difficult in a very young child. Your attachments are very broken and can be very fractured, and you feel very unsure as to, I suppose there are trust issues as well, as to, you know, where am I going to be today, where am I going next week? You know, you don't understand the whys and the wherefores as to why you're moving or why you're not at home. So that's very difficult on you as a child, and I'm sure for those who are caring for you as well, trying to understand the pieces around that and trying to support you in it. And I suppose if you look back, that's roughly in the 1980s or thereabouts into the 90s. So if you look at it, things were very different back then, and the level of understanding that we have now about children and how their mind works and how important it is for their development and the support that you acquire, the knowledge just wasn't there, you know, and the things that can happen to a child at a young age and how it affects you in later life, I don't think we understood. However, I think we are learning now, and there is understanding, and foster parents receive a lot of training, and you know, to meet the needs of the child and how they can present in the home and the different behaviours and all the stuff around that. So they're my experiences from, I suppose, early life, and obviously you're going to school and bits and pieces, and all of which impacts a child in care. Going to school is very different from a child who's at home in their family of origin. I think there's pieces of work to do there with schools and understanding, because I didn't know any other child in the school that I was in who was in a similar situation, or maybe they were and I just wasn't aware. And I felt as well that there wasn't understanding in the education system either of a child who might have missed a lot of time, or who didn't have the necessary requirements, books, equipment, whatever the case may be, to I suppose participate or to be an active part of the school system. It didn't fit everybody, and at times didn't fit, I suppose, my needs at certain periods of my life. However, I progressed through, and secondary school as well came with its own challenges, shall we say, because obviously you bring your past experiences with you and your whatever's still going on for you. And then I was lucky enough to go on and study social care in later life, and then worked with children and young persons, and spent a good bit of time working with people with intellectual disabilities. I spent some time teaching healthcare and childcare and that kind of stuff, and which brought me eventually to my new role in Tusla, which is within the quality regulation sector. So I think my past journeys have brought me here, and hopefully the things that I have learned and the experiences I have gained will help me, hopefully, in some way shape how I work and maybe influence how others might go about their daily business in terms of working with children and young people.
Yeah, thanks, Clodagh. If it's okay to go back a little bit, what happened after that young part of your life? Did you move into a placement that kind of lasted a long time, or what happened next?
No, so there was a couple of placements due to ill health of parents and stuff. So sometimes it was emergency placements and things like that. And then eventually there was reunification, and then that would kind of work for a while, and then obviously people at home would become unwell again, or not, just inability to cope. And then I would be either moved back into the foster parents or staying with relatives, which I was very lucky in that 2 relatives were in a position to take me, one in particular, and on both sides of the family I spent a little bit of time with both, but one aunt was hugely influential in looking after me from a very young age alongside her own family. So that was lucky once I got to kind of an age where I think of it myself where I could manage myself, i.e. 7, 8, 9, 10, where there was less care involved with me, that you're able to, I suppose, say what your needs are, hungry, thirsty, I need whatever, as best you can as a child who's been, maybe needs haven't always been met. You're not really going to voice off on what you need. I was a very quiet child. As a result of my experiences, I very quickly figured out, or I thought, quiet children get left at home, because anybody who's been in the care system will tell you quite quickly, it does not matter what's going on at home, you want to be there. It doesn't matter what trauma is going on there, it doesn't matter what upset. Every single child you will speak to within the care system, I would imagine, or most of, regardless, will say they want to be at home.
Was that your experience too?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I became a people pleaser, so I told everybody what they wanted to hear. Yeah,
it's kind of heartbreaking thinking of the child who just wants to stay there and will try and behave in certain ways so that can happen. Yeah.
So whether it was you or whoever was saying, "Oh, would you like to come and stay with me?" and I'd say yes, but you absolutely didn't want to stay anywhere that wasn't at home. It didn't matter. You just wanted to be at home. That was it, regardless of when you were back there an hour later. The same things were going on. But when the push came to shove, that's where you wanted to be, was at home in your own environment. I think a child in care becomes very used to the traumatic experience become normalised. So to me, it was what I grew up in. I became accustomed to the noisy environment and all the stuff that was going on in my particular circumstances. It might seem very unusual for somebody else to go in and think, God, this is absolute mayhem. But to me, it wasn't. It was normality. It was just daily life.
And so was your aunt there for you through your school journey?
Yeah. So we'll say my aunt lived close by, so I was able to go to in later life, I was able to go to my school that I was used to with her children and go on the same bus and be relatively near to my parents and stuff. And when I was well enough, or my mum and dad were well enough, I was able to go home. And then when things would change, I was able to stay with her for a few days, or however, well, it was often more than a few days, it was months at a time, because my mum had mental illness. So that doesn't cure overnight. It's not like a cold or a flu or whatever. That doesn't go away easily. So she would need a bit of help. And then when she would come from hospital settings or whatever, it would take her a bit of time again to be able to care for me. So we're giving her a little bit more respite to kind of come back to herself as well, and give her time to manage in the home and stuff like that. And then we'd try, maybe she might come home for a weekend and I might stay for a night, and just to see how we would manage. So there was a lot of uncertainty in all that for a child.
Oh yeah, it sounds so, and it sounds as though there weren't social workers involved at that point. It was within your family with your aunt. So
there would always have been social workers involved, visiting the home. Yeah, just making sure that things were okay. I suppose the social workers weren't visiting as often when they knew we were kind of managing, so they would have had the information that during my mum's hospital stays that I was staying with my aunt, so they knew I was being cared for. And then once I got a little bit older, they were aware that, that I suppose the needs of a 9-year-old and the needs of a 5-year-old are quite different. They're a bit more able, plus I very quickly assumed the role of carer myself to my mum. It's role reversal really very quickly. So I was doing the looking after for a long time. So there is that as well, which I think, as we spoke very earlier in our conversation, which is once more why brought me to my work, where I try and care for others. I have done for most of my career, and in Tusla as well. It is working with children, young people, and families. So when you begin caring early, it stays with you.
Yes, yeah, and it feels familiar, and
yeah. It's what you know.
And there's lots of positive sides to that, I'm
Absolutely.
guessing.
Yeah, because you're bringing your insight and your lived experience. When I work with young people and children, I hear the stories. Like, it requires very little explanation. You can relate straight away to some of the things they would speak of. I was asked something recently, and there were conversations about when a child comes into care very quickly, and the fact that they mightn't have any belongings, or whatever belongings they have is in a bag, plastic bag. I have a fierce aversion to plastic shopping bags, which we don't see much of nowadays, but I can remember even the sound of the old plastic shopping bags, where I might have a pair of shoes, a set of underwear if I'm lucky, maybe a night dress, and the chances are they would need a wash a lot of the times when I was moving. So there's a huge sense of shame around that as well, that that what you have isn't very much, and it isn't very clean as it might be, but it's all you have, and it's putting your things into a bag is very difficult.
Yeah, I'm just really touched by that, actually. Yeah. And I believe the guidance across the board now is no child's belongings should ever be put in a plastic bag,
Yes.
It's just not dignified, it's not honouring the child at all. And
so when you move very quickly, your things don't come with you. And I was thinking lately, because a lot of our work involves I suppose reflecting, and I was reflecting on coming on here today, and I was sitting in my room and I was looking at the many pairs of shoes, because anybody who knows me knows I love shoes and anything that goes with it. And I was looking and I went, all the shoes, and I said, at one point I would have only owned maybe one.
Yes.
And I've realised how privileged I am to have more than one pair of shoes, and not only that they belong to me. So often children who arrive in care, who have come from care, have come from different circumstances, even though they may have a pair of shoes or whatever the case may be, they may have once belonged to somebody else.
Yeah,
so there's lots of things like that stick with you, and your belongings are important. They're part of you, and I've seen experiences where I stayed with people and stuff, and they might say, we'll put that in the bin, or we'll dispose of that, and you're kind of going, well, that's just one thing I have that was mine, even though you could see it might shred in the washing machine or whatever, but I'd like to keep it. There's certain things that are mine, and I've brought from home that are meaningless, but
but not to you.
But not to me, or not, when you have so little, your so little becomes so important.
So from school, you were experiencing a bit of upheaval and uncertainty between your mum's place and your aunt, and how did it feel that going back and forth?
Yeah, I suppose it was good to have the, in my older years, to have the support as well, but you kind of you grow up very quickly. You don't want to be dependent. You don't want to kind of say, it becomes, I suppose, the more as you get older, you become more aware of what's going on. In many ways, it becomes more difficult, because it's not really normal, because you begin to visit friends' houses and you see there's just something wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas your normal is very different to their normal, and obviously your education is coming, and your understanding of not everybody's house is the way mine was, you know, that there's a stability and there's a dinner on the table most evenings at least, whereas in mine it looked very different, or I was at a friend's house, or, you know, that kind of thing. I seemed to move around a lot, and everyone else they just went home, whereas I went home every evening, or sometimes I didn't know if I was going home to my house. When I went to school in the morning, things could change by the time I'd come home, and maybe somebody else might pick me up and I'd have to stay with my aunt. Or so often school days weren't, it was very hard to concentrate when you're in school, to think that you've either gone to school and mum wasn't well, will she be there in the evening when I come home? Will she be in hospital? Am I going somewhere? Am I going to be left here? There was a while where in my teenage years I was living alone for 6 or 8 months in the house. It's, I think, 16, 17 or thereabouts, yeah.
How was that?
I became very independent, great little housekeeper. I had a lot of support from friends. Mamas and dads very good. Very discreetly, do you want to come down for your tea? You may as well sit at the table. Sure, you're here now.
Yeah.
Knowing full well that mightn't have had the tea. Knowing full well that the hot water's on there for the shower. Do you want to jump in? The lads here are doing that. Knowing full well that, you know, I'm making extra sandwiches for the morning. Oh, genius, there's extra there. Do you want to take those? Very discreetly done, but very meaningfully done.
Yes.
You know, so I had very good people around me, luckily. Not everybody is as lucky as I've been.
This is Aisha McFerrin, and you're listening to the Stories from Foster Care podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And so from school, Clodagh, what happened then?
So from school onwards, kind of not sure what I wanted to do with life. A couple of bits of jobs, doing courses, doing programs, kind of unsure what I wanted. Then I got a job for years, and I worked in Dell Computers in Limerick for close to 9 years. And then obviously that closed and I got redundancy, and I had a huge graw for education for a long time. Huge graw, and I thought it's my opportunity to do something. So I headed straight for childcare. Funnily enough, thinking I was going to work in creche. I absolutely was never going to work in creche. I do not like nappies. But I did like working in the school, so I did some placements there and I loved it. And then I was looking at doing childcare full time, and I didn't get accepted on the programme for some reason. I think on the day I went into the particular college, and I felt I didn't fit because of my background. I felt inferior. It wasn't good enough. Nothing to do with college, all to do with me.
Right.
I didn't belong. I thought I answered the questions at the interview perfectly well. I thought I had done, but from the time I landed there, I just didn't feel it was for me. For some reason, I wasn't that type of person. I hadn't got the education. I hadn't come from the right school. I just thought, no. And then later on, I went to another college and I did the interview, and sure, it was a very different feel. Straight away I felt, yeah. I had met somebody, I attended a coffee morning for the other particular college, and I met somebody who'd come through adult education herself, and she said, you know, we do social care training here, and I was going, oh geez, I love it, but again, I don't fit. I'm not good enough. How would I manage it? And then when I was looking around, there was more than me who come through the adult education system, and I saw less difference. I was like, well, they're just kind of like me. And I said, you know, I'll fill in the form, and I did. And 12 months later, I was doing the coffee morning and showing people around the college, and explaining my story with the view of trying to get across, you absolutely are good enough. We're all good enough. And more so, if you look at it in social care and social work and those particular kind of backgrounds, I think it needs the people who feel they're not good enough.
Absolutely. Who have the lived experience that have created those sort of internal barriers. Yeah.
And who understand, yeah.
Well, so, not only internal barriers, also external, but you're describing that feeling that you carried inside. Yeah.
Really thought, you know. But I suppose when I saw the library, I was kind of sold alright, because my love of books came at a very young age. Sometimes I would read books, and it would take me away from particular situations that might be going on in the house. Even though I might have read the same book 10 times, it would just, I knew once I read whatever little book I might have, I wouldn't be in the room, I wouldn't be in the setting I was in. It would just take the mind elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I learned from a very young age particular coping skills that stood very well to me, I think.
Yeah. Or the colouring book, yeah.
Would take you into your own little thing. And actually, you know, as we speak of colouring books, and I spoke earlier of ownership, which is very important to children when they're in care. I remember one time my dad bought me a gift while I was in care. And the gift was, he often bought little things or whatever, but for some reason this was particularly special to me. So it was a poster in kind of a container, so you'd roll out the poster and it had markers and you'd colour it in. There was only 2 posters in it, but I was asked to share it. I didn't like sharing it because I felt I don't get very much, and it was one thing he'd given me. I struggled with it. I was like, it's the only thing I have, and I'm being asked to share. I found it so difficult. No, I did, but it was really difficult because the ownership piece and it was for me, and I just felt that the other kids had got lots of things that were for them, and I rarely got anything that was for me.
And these were your cousins, is that right, that you were living with? Yeah.
I found that really difficult.
Yeah.
Now, despite them sharing their whole world with me, just that particular piece, I mean, sharing their dinner plates, basically their beds, we often slept in top and tails and all sorts. Do you know what I mean? We shared the same baths. I mean, you know, that was how it was in the day. My cousin and I would love going into the bath at the same time. We're young, you know what I mean? So
that's very understandable.
Yeah.
And so when you moved on and after Dell and you began to study social care, did things fall into place from your own experience? Did it give you like another perspective on all of that?
Yeah, I found we did a lot of personal development as part of the social care programme. I found it hugely difficult to begin with because I'm a doer and I'm a goer and I want to be on the move and I want to be doing things. And I very quickly realised that if I sit and think, thoughts come, and I don't like them. And when you're in a room with personal development and the first thing you do in the morning on a Monday at 9 a.m. is like 10 or 15 minutes of grounding and sitting in a chair and closing the eyes, I found it so difficult to be in the room, be in space. My friend will even smile when she hears this because I spend so many times saying, what in the name of God are we doing? Like sitting there, and that lecture, I realised I have assignments to do, and I'm wrecked from working yesterday in the hospital, and I've loads of things to do, and I'm sure I can't be sitting around here thinking of things. Out of the 10 people in the room, I was the one who needed it most. As the programme progressed, I learned, and I had huge development from it. I did take part. I was able to learn how to relax and breathe, and I discovered there were certain things that I'd never been able to say out loud, and I didn't know that I couldn't say them. Because when you don't say, you've never tried to say them, like I wasn't able to say that my mum had passed away. And that was 2014 and she was gone, I suppose, since 2003 at that point. I don't know why I found it so difficult to say it. And I was like, I'm sure I've said this before. I absolutely have said it before, of course I have. I don't know why I found it so difficult to say it. Mm-hmm. I think it might have been because you were allowing yourself the space around it. At other times you would have said it in contextual conversation and moved on, whereas this was, and how does that sit with you? And I don't like the sitting with you piece, or at least I didn't at the time.
Yes.
I wanted to move on, because moving on was easier.
Yeah, we can stay one step ahead or 2 steps ahead of things, and stay busy and
But staying busy catches up with you eventually.
Mm-hmm.
You eventually have to stop and look and examine, because you will eventually, and my biggest worry in social care was that I would meet myself along the way.
So meet yourself in terms of those things that you hadn't said?
In terms of meeting a young person who was in the very similar position that I was.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. That was my biggest worry in my career, was I would come something would come very close to home and would hit. That was really hard to, it hasn't done really as such, but I've met people with similar stories and I've been able to cope. Obviously, you're not going to meet someone who's in exactly the same position, but that was my worry starting out, that I would come across me.
And when you came across you, then you would see you in a different way. You'd feel yourself in a different way. You'd be confronted by something. Is that right?
Yeah. Then something would come up and I was, how am I going to deal with it? Or maybe I haven't dealt with that at all. And then the other side of me was going, it's not necessarily a bad thing because I'll be well able to relate to this person because I have had experiences. While also being mindful as my experiences will be very different to that person's.
Yeah, similar but not the same type.
Because nothing is ever the same.
No.
When I was a child, I didn't hear people speaking ill of my parents. Or a lot of conversations were had in my presence that were of adult level. So I mentioned earlier, I became a carer very quickly. I became an adult very quickly from listening to conversations, from understanding quite well what was going on, from figuring out who didn't like who didn't speak to who maybe I shouldn't speak to because somebody would be unhappy if they were seeing that I liked that person.
Yeah, there's a real kind of vigilance and all of that, isn't there?
Yeah,
like a watchfulness. Yeah.
Which in many ways, somebody who worked with me in the past said to me, I've never worked with anybody as observant. And I said, yes. I said, I've spent a lot of years in social care. I said, it has taught me to be observant when you're working with people because people are unpredictable and you don't know really, how somebody's going to react. And, I would have worked with a lot of individuals with very high care needs, so you have to be vigilant to keep them safe and to keep yourself safe. But it really comes from your environment. You're constantly watching the room, watching reactions, body language, facial expressions, who's in my best interest to please.
Yeah, it's so intelligent, isn't it? In a way, it's a survival. Would you say?
It's very
pattern?
Basic survival skills, and it is very basic because you're just surviving. You're not making yourself happy. You're just making other people content. You think, or telling them what they want to hear. You think, and that's bearing in mind on the occasions that you were asked. Obviously, sometimes you weren't asked, or you were asked rhetorical questions.
And who would be asking those questions of you, the rhetorical ones?
It would particularly come upon times when you were asked either to go into care or stay with somebody. Yeah.
So you didn't really have a choice?
No.
Okay.
The question was, you were going. There wasn't a question. There wasn't an option in many cases,
But it was put to you as a question.
A lot of time, yeah.
How did your social care sort of pathway unfold for you? How did you cope with navigating things that came up? And
I suppose the personal development program was hugely beneficial. I had a lovely circle of friends, which I still have friendships now later in years. And I learned then that what I went through as a child, there was no shame in. And it was okay to say it. Because I think up to those years, I might mention a little thing, but I wouldn't let you in. Whereas then I learned that actually, if I share my experiences, it's really good for me because it's getting it out. And then other people in social care can learn from my experiences, much as I hope people will learn from today. So sharing has become kind of therapeutic to me almost, from hiding everything and pretending and, almost denying that it didn't happen or, things like that. Being able to say it, it's a huge relief to say, yeah, that was me, that's part of my past. It doesn't mean it shapes me a little bit, but it doesn't mean it's all of me. It's a little piece.
Yeah, and no doubt at all that this is going to be valuable and helpful for people listening. You were saying you shared your story for the first time quite recently. Is that right? Were you at a conference?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the webinar for the Tusla Care Experience Network. So it was one of my first times actually publicly sharing my story, or little snippets of it. Very scary. Thought it would be easier than what it was because it was an online piece. It's never easy. I don't think no matter how many times you say it, it still hits you. There's a pit in my stomach even as I speak to you today. It's hard.
Yeah, and
it is hard.
I just really appreciate that and appreciate you being willing to share it, even though it's hard. And yeah, and I'm glad to hear that it's bringing you something as well in ways, you know. Yeah. So you moved on from social care.
Yeah, I moved on from social care. I worked a little bit, many years in disabilities. I worked in residential settings with children and young people. Dipping in and out, wasn't sure, what will I do next? And I went on to teaching adult education. So I taught everything from childcare to palliative care to health and safety to nursing theory and practice, loads of things. Taught during COVID online while I worked in residential services as well. And then later that brought me to working in disability day services. And then just late last year, or last May actually, into Tusla, and I work in quality and regulation now. I think it was something that I feel I've arrived. Bit of a journey, but I've arrived. I feel it's a fit. Yeah.
Can you say a little more about that? What is it about it?
I think it's just if there's a vibrancy in it, there's a willingness to learn. It's a new organisation. It's children and families. It's something I understand naturally, if that's okay to say. When I worked in disabilities, while obviously I would have known people with disabilities, but I had to learn from the people with disabilities and from theory and practice, whereas I feel now I have more of an understanding from experience, professionally and personally. But I think sometimes the personal outweighs the professional, because I still have an awful lot learned in Tusla, because I'm only here 12 months and there's so much to learn about how we practice and, how the legislation, and there's loads to learn. It's something new every day, but I just feel it's an easier fit for me.
And so you're in is it quality
and regulation? Yeah.
So are you dealing with the public? And
no, so I don't deal directly with the public. So I work in complaints and feedback side of the house. Yeah.
Okay.
So very different.
Yeah.
To what I've been used to.
Yeah.
But I think it's a lovely role in that for every complaint or every piece of feedback, I can absolutely see a service user and their families at the other end of it. And the level of understanding it, sometimes people get frustrated or upset, and how important it is to hear it. How important it is for us to try and do our best while also managing the expectations of what we can and what we can't do, which sometimes can be misunderstood. And also, what's really important in the work that I do is that the service user or the complainant or whoever you're dealing with at the other side understands what we say.
Yeah, that's really important.
I see from, there's almost a new language within how we work. There's big words, there's care systems, there's, court orders, I can't even think of all the words, there's acronyms for everything. And if you're the ordinary person at the other end of it, you're going, what does this mean? What happens now? Where does this letter come from? Who's the person? Like, plain English is something that needs to be used a little bit more. I understand that within the court system and stuff, there is language and there's legislation and all the pieces that go with it, but they belong there, not in normal speak, not when you work with children and families, not when you work with somebody who may have I was lucky enough to have gone to school most of the time and I have a good education, but not everybody has. And certainly not everybody in the care system. There is huge literacy, numeracy gaps there as well. And it's about helping people understand it might take a small phone call for 10 minutes to say this is exactly what that letter means, or not even to write the letter like that, to just write a letter plainly.
Yeah, in the first place.
In the first place,
and
it will
make it
save
easier.
you time and upset on the other side.
So, Clodagh, looking back over all the territory we've been exploring together, is there anything about foster care and the experience of carers and children in care that you'd like to share?
I would say it's very important that foster carers are recognised, and more so I would say relative foster carers, because often we say, oh sure, they're just going to do it anyway because they're relatives. Like, it's very hard for them because they're so close. And some will say easier in a way. It's not. It's never easy to take on somebody's child and, have a hand in bringing them up or whatever, because somebody could say, you did it wrong. It's really difficult, and you're very close to the bone of what's going on often. In my case, like, it was family, and, it's a member of brother, sister, whatever, that they can see is going through a very hard time. And that's difficult, whereas I think ordinary foster carers mightn't have that greater insight. And then if you turn that in the other way, the other side of the coin is ordinary foster carers who aren't relative foster carers don't know exactly what the child's coming from. In many cases, they might have an idea, or they mightn't have an awful lot of information on the child's background, and that leaves them at a loss as to how to support, as we said earlier, and how to try and look after the child and try and meet the needs and try and understand why they're behaving in certain ways, or why they're withdrawn, or maybe they're angry, or all the emotions that they go through. I think it's really important to to have those pieces heard. I know there's huge work being done at the moment on foster care trainings and stuff like that, which is so important. But I think as well, when I spoke earlier about fostering, I think it's so important that we attract the very ordinary person out there into fostering.
So, Clodagh, we're coming towards the end of our conversation, and I just really want to thank you for coming up from Limerick, number one, but also being so open and generous with sharing your experiences, which will be of benefit to anyone who listens to this, and has been to me listening to you. So thank you.
Thanks, delighted to have been given the opportunity.
Is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Not really, just to say I'm very happy to be given the opportunity, and I just hope that services are learning from our past experiences. But I just also would like to say that while I've shared many things today that might seem maybe negative to a certain year, overall my experiences have been very positive. I think it's important that people know that I feel services have done well as they could have with what they had at the time.
Yes, thank you for that. Thanks, Clodagh. I'm very grateful to Clodagh for this conversation, which is really going to stay with me. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode of Stories from Foster Care. See you next time.